Hey guys, welcome back to the Preserves, and welcome back to another edition of Band of the Week. On today's Band of the Week, we are going to be featuring a band that really didn't get as much notoriety as I think they should have. They were probably one of my, favorite bands from the early to mid 80s, and that band is Britney Fox. Britney Fox was formed by Dean Davidson on guitar and vocals, and Billy Childs on bass. They also had two former members from Cinderella. You may know these guys: Tony Destra, he was on drums, and Michael Kelly Smith, who was on lead guitar. These guys were their name was kind of inspired by one of Dizzy's Welsh ancestors, and they were kind of described as a trashy Victorian glam band. If that's kind of weird, but yeah, that's kind of how they were described. And so with having this connection to Cinderella, they were able to secure a pretty major recording contract with the label that Cinderella was on. And they recorded their first album, and just before they had kicked off their tour for this for their first album here, the Tony Destra was in a fatal car crash, and they had to scramble to find another drummer to fill the spot before the tour, and they finally got a temporary drummer, Adam Ferrelli, or however you pronounce his name, but they got him to fill in for the tour, and they finally landed on John DeToro, or his name was actually Johnny D, stage name Johnny D. They picked him up from a band called Wasted, and he became their permanent drummer for the rest of the tour. And before Tony's passing, they released a demo called In America, and that was released in 1987. And after that, they released another demo with Adam on the drums called Rock Is Gonna Fight. Now, this demo set the pace for them to release their first studio album in 1988. And that was a self-titled studio album just called Britney Fox. And this album actually achieved one of the most successful debut albums of the 88-89 season, achieving gold status with over 500,000 copies being sold from this album. And this album featured songs like Girl School, Long Way to Love, and Hold On. On the tour for this album, they mostly opened up for Rat and Poison, but they did headline a few of these shows, with Warrant being their opener act. And this tour was pretty extensive, with over 130 shows that they played for this album, and it was a very extensive tour. Now, in 1989, they were back in the studio and released their second album, Poison Heat. This album debuted on the Billboard 200 at 149, but by the next week it had already reached 79 on the top Billboard 200. This album didn't do quite as well, but it was still doing quite well. And some of the notable songs from that album, actually, they did a cover of Hair of the Dog by Nazareth. Now you're messing with Long Way From Home. An Angel in My Heart. Shortly after the release of this album, Dizzy left the band and formed another band called Black Eyed Susan. And he was replaced by Tommy Paris, aka Don Gilson of the Gilson Band. And on their third album, Bite Down, Zakk Wylde, none other than Zakk Wylde from Ozzy Osbourne, and Ricky Rocket from Poison, featured on this album on a few tracks. They guested on this. And this album was released in 91. By this time, we all know what was going on in the music scene. Alternative grunge was starting to take over, and a lot of these glam and hair metal bands had started to fall off. And the Britney Fox was no different in this fall off of the glam metal scene, and this third album really didn't do very well at all, and it started like the downfall of all of these bands in this time in 91, 92. But anyway, this album did have some notable tracks on it. A few of my favorite songs from this album: Louder, Closer to Your Love, and Shot From My Gun. Shortly after this release in 91, in 1992, they disbanded for various reasons, and it wasn't until 2000 when they reunited with their last lineup, their last most recent lineup, and went back into the studio and released their fourth studio album, Springhead Motor Shark, which is kind of a weird name. At this time, I wasn't really listening to them very much, and I did hear a couple of their songs, but this album was pretty much a flop, and it didn't do so well. But some of the songs from this album are Pain, Far Enough, and Lonely One. Now, when they were going to tour for this album, they were supposed to bring in White Lion drummer Greg D'Angelo, but during the rehearsals for the tour of this album, D'Angelo actually broke his foot, and they had to replace him, and they replaced him with Henry Now, which is a weird name for a guy and a weird name for a drummer, but that's who they replaced him with. This new lineup was actually built for the movie Incest Death Squad, which I never seen that movie, but they did do part of the soundtrack for that album. And then Dizzy tried to reunite the original lineup of Britney Fox in 2010, but he wasn't successful in doing so. And then again in 2015, Childs reformed the band, and they were set to release their 5th studio album, but in 2017 that idea was abandoned, and it wasn't until 2022 when Childs reformed Britney Fox with none of the original members except for himself, and they toured through 2023, and in 2023, Michael Kelly Smith said he was in contact with all the original members of Britney Fox from the first 2 studio albums, and he hinted that they were supposed to release another studio album, but I haven't heard anything further from that, and that has yet to be seen. So, with that being said, if you guys have never heard Britney Fox, you should probably go and check them out. Their first 2 studio albums are my favorite, but they did have a couple of notable songs on their 3rd studio album. With that, that's going to be the end of this edition of Band of the Week. And stay tuned. I've got another Band of the Week coming up next week, because it's been a few weeks since I have posted Band of the Week, so I thought I would do 2 in a row, which wasn't a set schedule, but last week I had a bunch of stuff going on, and the week before I couldn't get to doing any videos because of all the things going on for summer. So with that being said, that's going to be the end of today's Band of the Week, guys, and peace.